This is the Abbey. It's another wet fly out of Ray Berman's book, Trout. I have not fished this fly, but I have tied it a number of times and taught it in a number of different classes. It's just an all-around fun little wet fly. It has all the basic pieces and parts and components of wet flies. So it's a great fly if you want to get into tying wet flies. This is a size 8, so it's a little bit big in terms, not in terms of wet flies, but in terms of trout flies, which is also kind of nice because if the fly is a little bigger, it's a little easier to learn. But it's a fun fly. The only real challenge to it is the mallard flank wing, and there's a couple of ways to do that, which I'll explain in the video. That's the Abbey, and we'll go ahead and get started. Start the Abbey by placing our hook in the vise. This is a Mustad 3399 in a size 8. This is a traditional wet fly hook. I'll go ahead and debarb that. Now, because I'm using a floss body, this is just a red Danville 4-strand floss body. I'm going to use 2 different colored threads on this. I'm going to start out with a white. If I were to put a black thread on the base, it would darken that floss up. I'm going to start my thread about an eye length behind the eye of the hook, run it down the hook shank to just about the point of the hook. And here I'm going to tie in my tinsel for the tag. Now I'm using 2 different size tinsels on this. I'm going to use a size 14 Danville gold Mylar tinsel for the tag, and I'm using a 16 and 18 size gold Mylar tinsel for the rib. The reason is I could use this 16 and 18 for the tag as well. It's just going to take more wraps of that tinsel to get down around the bend, and the 14 does just fine. But the 14 is just a little bit big for doing the rib on these. So I'll attach that with the silver side up. And I'm going to keep wrapping down the hook shank. The idea behind these flies, a lot of these wet flies that have floss bodies, is to keep the body as smooth as possible. So I'm not wrapping in one spot or back and forth on top of other wraps because I don't want to develop a bump. I start wrapping that tinsel in. I'm going to get 4 wraps down the bend of the hook and then 4 wraps back up. Just put a little tag on that. Three wraps in to secure it. You want to make certain that you get 3 good wraps or 4 in to secure that tinsel, because when you cut this off right here, which you could cut that the full length of the body if you want, I find that it will flatten down well enough as I wrap the other materials in that it doesn't produce a bump. But when you cut that off here, if you don't have it secured real well, it can come out from under the wraps and everything's unraveled, and it's a mess. Now we're going to tie in the tail for the Abbey. The tail is just made from some golden pheasant tippets. Select a feather. You generally want to select the short ones down here. Are a little bit too short for this. You want to get some of the medium length or I generally just start from the back and select a feather out here. I just arbitrary, I reach in with my scissors for maybe about 1/8 of an inch, so I get a dozen fibers or so. I don't need a whole lot. You'll notice there is a dull side to this as well as a brighter side. I want to try and roll these in on that dull side so that I have more of the brighter colors on the outside of that. I measure that about a shank length, and then I'm going to tie that in where my thread is. You'll notice my thread is just at the point of the hook, so I'm going to advance it backwards just a few wraps to secure that. The body will end up starting right about almost to the point of the barb of the hook, just a little further back. Now I'm going to use my size 16 and 18 gold Mylar tinsel for the rib. Again, I wrap that in with the silver side up. This time I am going to leave that the length of the body. I'll get a couple of wraps in just to hold that. Also, I'll trim off the golden pheasant tippets to about the length of the body right there. Now it's time to tie in the floss body. As I mentioned, this is just a Danville 4-strand rayon in red. If you want a little bit thinner body, you could go with just, say, 3 strands or even 2 strands. I'm going to go ahead and, because this is a larger size hook, go ahead and use all 4. Again, securing that up under the thread, pulling that down so the ends are just inside the length of the body. And again, I'll put a couple more wraps just to advance all that down to the final length of the body, collecting all that together, making certain it hasn't twisted to the far side of the hook. Then I'll advance my thread forward. I don't have to have exact touching turns to keep it nice and smooth. You want them to be fairly close together. But the red floss will cover up any other materials. The white will be enough to give it a nice bright base to it. Stop with my thread right at the end of the body. Now I'll wrap my floss in. I want to make certain to stroke on that first wrap, stroke your floss around as you come around the hook to get all those fibers under the same tension. That way, all your subsequent wraps will be nice and smooth, just slightly overlapping. You just want to make certain that you're not changing the tension on that, and then that's when you get fibers out front here that start to stray out. Secure that in with a few wraps. Now put the rib on. The tinsel will flip over to the gold side. I'll get 1 wrap at the back and then start my rib with 5 evenly spaced wraps. The 6th wrap will be right up in the head space where the thread's at. Attach it. Trim away the excess. Advance my thread forward to just behind the eye of the hook, and this is where I'm going to change my thread. For both of these, I'm using a Uni-8. The first one was a white, and this is in a black. Attach my thread right behind the eye of the hook, and then advance backwards, trapping in my black tying thread as well as the white, and I can trim away the white thread. Want my thread right back at the end of the head space. This is where I'm going to tie in the throat. The throat for our fly is, I'm using some of the longer fibers off of some strong Rooster saddle hackle. You could use a Schlappen. Schlappen is going to be much softer, and that's fine. If you don't have a Schlappen, the Rooster saddle hackle will work. You want to just find a nice feather that's kind of broad at the base like this, has some nice long soft fibers. You strip away the fluff. Then I want to get, if you're measuring, I would probably say about a 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch. Fiber-wise, you're looking at maybe 20 barbs there. Just get them perpendicular to the rachis of the feathers so that the tips are all even. Peel those off. Then collect those together. Place them on the underside here. I like the tips to just go inside the gap of the hook. And then we'll attach that with a pinch wrap. Trim away the excess. Clean that up just a little bit to smooth it off. And there's our throat. Now, the interesting part of this fly, I don't know, it's not just interesting, but it's the wing. It's made out of mallard flank. It's a little different than matched wings out of duck. I find the mallard a little bit more challenging, let's put it that way, to work with. Ideally, what you're looking for in your flank material, unless you're getting, very select barred mallard flank or something, you're looking for a left and a right. And this is be your left, your right. But these are feathers taken from the left and the right side of the mallard. And the reason is that what you're looking for are just some of the barbs right here that you'll match up with some of the barbs on this side, so that when you match them up, you get this nice sloped wing edge right here, something like that right in there. However, I have a couple of large bags from Hairline of mallard flank, and that's the only right feather that I found in the whole bag. And that's what you run across, is most of the time you just don't find these nice big feathers in these bags of mallard flank. You have to sift through a lot to find them. So there is an alternative. That's what I'm going to show today. You can take just your average mallard flank. You want to find one that's pretty flat on the ends right here, and it's pretty even, so the rachis doesn't go down to one side and have shorter fibers on one side and longer fibers on the other. It's pretty balanced on both sides. You're going to strip away the fluff like this. Get it pretty even down here at the bottom. This may be a little bit hard to show on camera. Then, taking your hackle pliers, got my small hackle pliers here, I want to grab the tip of this feather, like this. Just holding on to that tip, what I want to do is separate the fibers on each side away from that tip. Like I said, this might be kind of cumbersome on screen to show. But the idea is that you get these fibers together over here on this side. Once you start learning how to do this, it's not nearly as involved as it is showing in here. But you get the two sides kind of split up. Then you're going to take your hackle pliers and grab the bottom of that rachis like this. Gives you some weight to hold it. Your other hand's going to hold the tip. In your hand, you're going to cradle the end of that, and then you're going to, with your thumb and index finger, you're essentially going to fold those two sides around. So you just fold those around. Once they're together, you can massage them over here to get them nice and even. Then, if I can get this in here, you're going to keep a hold on them in your left hand, the tips, and then just cut them away from the rachis. Now, what you have isn't a beautiful matched set of a left and a right, but what you do have is what will work as a wing for this fly. Sometimes they'll get a little bunched together. That's fine. You're going to measure it so the tips are about halfway down the tail. We're going to wrap that in with a pinch wrap. Wrap that in 3 or 4 times to make certain that we are on top. Everything looks even. And now trim away the excess. There's other ways to do these wings. Some just involve clumping together some fibers and tying them in. I think when this swims in the water and they lay back, I think that they pretty much look the same. So I don't know that it's hugely important in terms of fishing this fly that you have just a really, really nice looking, wonderful swept wing. Five or 6 turn whip finish. I'll put a little bit of head cement on the sides. Just want to have half a drop right down in there. That will soak down in. Once that soaks down in to the thread and dries, I will start to put some black lacquer on that. Sometimes I will coat it with a coat or two of hardest hull. What the hardest hull is going to do, it's going to start filling in the valleys in the thread wraps right there and overall smoothing it off. I can get 2 coats of this in that will smooth that off well enough so that one top coat of a black lacquer will just be all that's needed. So that's the Abbey. I'll come back in a little bit and put on that lacquer. You'll see it in the resulting finished fly, but that's how to tie the Abbey. A nice little wet fly. It's fun to tie. If you want to get into the wet flies, this has all the pieces and parts. It's got the tag, it's got the rib, the floss body, a simple wing. It doesn't have to be a matched wing. It's just a fun all-around fly. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me at Devise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.